On this special Father's Day edition of Kev Talks Real World Global Logistics, we're doing something a little different. We're hitting pause on freight rates and routing guides and talking about something even more important, fatherhood. Today, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Kevin Higgins, and a guy who's leading the heart in both business and life, Aron Kolosik, guest on our episode number 20. Aron's a logistics pro and the founder of Unstuck Master Plan, a coaching program helping people lead more intentional lives. To both Kevin and Aron, happy Father's Day. Let's talk about what being a dad has taught us about leadership, logistics, and showing up for what matters.
All right. Thanks, Kev.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Aron, I'll let you take off, man.
It's hard to say that I have a more important role than father, right? You think of your role as husband or son, these are important roles, but, the role of father is, it's heavy at times, right? You have this responsibility for your kids and you think about our organizations that we've led in the past, that's, I think about that all the time. Like we always have a responsibility to develop that next generation, to develop and be there with them. And with your kids, sometimes it's harder, right? Because you want certain things for them, but you got to let it go at times, right? You got to let them be their own men. And it's fun when it happens, when you start to see that, men or women, I guess, I have two boys. So for me, I've got a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old. And I often look at lens of like, well, what does success look like? Are they well adjusted? How does that work? And sometimes that's a lot of pressure. And I think we put too much pressure on that. But still it's a responsibility and one that I take super serious, right? As I'm sure you do, both of you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Greatest honor that I've ever been given, honestly, is to be a father. And I know I have a almost 33-year-old daughter. KP and I are similarly situated in our kids' age. They've grown up with each other, but my daughter, I always give her a hard time because I can only quote like the movie Mulan, right? So the greatest gift and honor I've ever given is being your father. And so it is a huge responsibility. And I actually have, it caused me to get the word legacy tattooed on my shoulder, and because I will leave a legacy one way or the other. And I just hope it's one that, she's able to look back, look upon and say, he gave me all the tools I needed to live my life appropriately. So yeah, it's a huge honor. It's the greatest honor I've ever been given.
Yeah,
for sure.
I've got two daughters, so I'm a girl dad. And like Higgins said, I think my oldest will be turning 30 this year, and my youngest is 28, I think. But being a dad has shaped me ways I never expected. Not just at home, but really kind of how I show up professionally. There's something about being a father that forces you to kind of slow down and think a little deeper. It's not always about how you get the job done, but it's how you do it. And for me, it was who's watching and the example that you're setting, and global logistics does, it's all about planning and problem solving, trying to stay calm under pressure. I know that sounds familiar to both of you, but it's basically parenting the shipping containers in a way. But being a dad taught me to lead with empathy, whether I was coaching a team or working with clients today and managing a crisis, which were many, but trying to bring that same patience and presence. I bring it home, and not all the time, but sometimes that means listening more than talking. So parenting definitely, and being a dad taught me a lot about doing that. It also made me realize how important consistency is. My kids don't need perfection, and they didn't get perfection, but they needed me to show up.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
I know that you guys, I know Aron, I know both of you guys will relate to this, but like for me, it's like a continual education. I continue to learn from my daughter because I didn't always get it right, so having an adult relationship with her has allowed me to see things through her eyes that I wished I could have seen earlier. And it's incredible because I'm able to apply that now as I go forward in a lot of relationships, and not just hers, but in a lot of relationships, business and personal. So I think it's just one of those things that you continue to learn and continue to become better at.
Yeah, I always joke with people when I work, before they have children. And when they have children, they have all these dreams, aspirations, and things it looks one way, right? And they said, well, what are you going to do after you have kids? I said, we're not going to talk about that until after you have the children. Yeah. Because something happens, right? Something happens, right. A switch gets flipped, when you have that child, and all of a sudden that responsibility, that, love that you never thought was even possible, right? It's like you thought you only had so much capacity to love, but then when you have a child, it's like, well, how could I actually love something more, right? Yeah. And it's like, it's really hard to predict what that looks like. And, Higgins here, the conversation of like your adult child, like that's where I'm at now with my son. He's 23. We go to the gym together in the mornings, and it's fun to watch him grow too, alongside me. Yeah. Right. We're pushing each other. He's pushing, like there's things that we're learning about each other through this game that strengthen me in so many ways, just like you said. And, I think back to leadership, I think this piece of understanding that they're watching you is so critical. Yeah. Right. I think you mentioned that. Like for me, I actually had my son, he's part of one of the groups that I lead. So I actually have a course that I teach. It's an 8-week course, but he's in the current course. Awesome. Part of the conversation on Wednesday night was he shared some things, and I said, hey, I didn't tell him what to say. I looked at the other guys. I'm like, this is because he's watched me, not because I told him what to do. Right. Yeah. They're constantly looking at our actions, not just our words. And they're looking at our outcomes, right? Like if you're saying, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and they look at you and say, well, you're not doing it. Yeah. Because your kids will tell you. People at work may not tell you, right? Your kids will just flat out tell you. But people at work, and so you have to be consistent, and do what you say. Yeah. That's a big, big lesson that I've learned through the years, right? Especially with your kids.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I was really young, like my dad, I was learning how to drive. I was 12, and we lived in a small town, so I was learning how to drive, and he did a slow roll through a stop sign, and he just looked over at me because he knew. He just did a slow roll. He looked over at me and goes, "Do as I say, not as I do." But because he knew I'm watching, right?
No, I hear you, man. One thing that I thought about when we were thinking about logistics and leadership, and one of the lessons that I got from my dad was just showing up. Yeah. Right. Like showing up matters, in work and life and logistics, and, like that is so important from a leadership perspective. And just, it's one of the things that my dad, he prided himself, like he missed one high school football game. Yeah. And I had younger brothers. I was, in high school, and I was 17, maybe probably sophomore, 15 or 16. And he missed a game because I had two younger brothers, and I think they were sick or something. Like they're like 4-1. Yeah. And, I had an interception that game, and he was like, I got in. First of all, like that was the whole thing. Like I actually got in the game, and I got an interception. He was just like torn up, and I'm like, it's okay, Dad. Like it's the only thing that you've ever missed that I can ever remember. Yeah. Right. And it's just, I just knew like he was always going to be there. And like that's been an important life lesson for me, of just like, especially with the challenges that we face in work. Yeah. Of like being on the road and doing all the things. And I'm like, no, not when it comes to those things that are important to the kids. If it's not important to the kids, then it's a different conversation. But if it's important to them, I show up. Yeah.
Yeah. So Aaron, 100%. Is that, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, just, a nugget of advice. And I think you just gave it, but I think you come from a unique perspective and approach, and you get it, and I think that's what resonates with you and with a lot of people. What additional advice would you give to these young dads, starting their professional career?
Yeah, I think, staying on that show up theme is, we get tempted to get sucked into work. I literally had a conversation with a guy the other day, was like, man, the last 3 days I have crushed it. I've got this done. And then he's like, but I let off the gas on my personal life.
Yeah.
I'm like, and then he sat there and he thought, that's not success. Right. And the rewards that we get in terms of at work and all of those things, like it's always going to be there. But until it's not, right? Until we retire. And then all of a sudden you have a family that you've created that may or may not know you. And for me, I think the lesson or the advice I would have is, be intentional and, don't miss things that are super important. Like, I think we get tempted to do that, but don't. Like, your leadership will understand when it's, important things that you need to do. And I think every one of us finds ways to do the important things, right? It's like, well, I should do this or should do that. There's always time. Like, I think it's a big excuse that we make of like, I don't have time. Well, you make time for the important things and make sure that that's one of the important things is showing up for your kids, being there. And it's not just quality time. It's also quantity time.
Yeah.
Like, it's like we say, it's just quality. Well, be there, be both. Like, let's do both quality and quantity, right? Like, why can't we do both of those things? And probably the last thing I would say there is, also, especially if you have young kids, be cognizant of your wife's load, right? I wasn't always that way, right?
Same.
It's like I would get home and I was mentally exhausted and I didn't realize the load that she had to carry during the day. Right. And so, in some ways she's just like, take these things, you know, and I'm like, I got nothing, but you need to make room and energy for that. Like that's super important because this game, whether you're a mom or you're a dad, like whoever's bearing that load, we've got to share in this thing. And I wish I would have known that earlier in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And it just makes me think of, music is a big part of this, soundtrack of my life just continues to be added to, right? But Cody Johnson has a song called Till You Can't. And that's exactly what he says in all aspects of your life. There's one part about there's a box of parts in the back of a car that your grandfather's been waiting to rebuild with you, it's kind of the story. And it's like, don't put it off, because it won't always be there. And so, I love that analogy. It's like we have to show up and be intentional, and haven't always been that way. And that's part of the continuing education, I think, for me anyway. I'm trying to be more present with my adult daughter. And not to say that I wasn't when she was younger, but I wasn't like I wished I would have been.
Well, I think what's I think, Aaron, like I said earlier, the perspective that you have, I love the advice that you just gave. And what I'm so proud of what you're doing, and glad that you're a resource, and that you're that you're there supportive for these young dads that are out there and they're trying to navigate and figure out. And, the culture tells them that they have to be all of that at work. And I think your perspective and your advice that you just gave is so important. That they need to know that there are resources and people like yourself that help them, navigate and work their way through how they can be a great dad, a great husband, and have a great career. You can do all of that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Great advice.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, whether we're moving freight or raising kids, it all comes down to, what we've talked about: consistency, patience, and being there when it counts. So, Aaron, thanks for sharing your wisdom, your journey, and every dad out there juggling cargo and carpools and terminals and T-ball. And we see you and we celebrate you.
Yeah.
Happy Father's Day from all of us at Kev Talks. Keep leading with purpose on the job and at home.
Happy Father's Day to you too. And happy Father's Day to everybody else.
Yes. Happy Father's Day, guys. Thank you.